All right, we will go ahead and get started. We have some folks who might join in later, and then some people let me know that they wouldn't be able to make it today, so they're going to watch the recording. So thank you for coming out on a Monday night. We are going to be talking about a whole bunch of stuff all about having a new dog. And it's okay if your dog isn't super new to you. It's okay if you've had dogs before. This is going to be sort of a general overview of a whole bunch of things to keep in mind when you get a new dog. So for those I haven't met, I'm Miranda Hitchcock. Myself and Michelle Mendoza started Every Dog Behavior and Training last year, and we are a nonprofit. Our goal is to try and make it so that more people in our Austin community are able to get professional dog behavior and training support. We know that there are a lot of reasons why people don't get access, and we want to overcome those barriers for folks. So we're at everydogaustin.org. On there, there's a whole bunch of resources. You can book private sessions with us. We have all of these webinars going on. There's a ton of resources on there if you check it out. And we're also on Facebook and Instagram. We're on Nextdoor, but don't use it quite as much. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram for lots of training tips and updates and things like that. So today, first off, congratulations, you have a new dog. That's really exciting. We're so glad that you decided to put a puppy in your life, whether they're an old or a young puppy. But we know that this is a really exciting time, but it's not without its challenges. So our plan today, like I said, is to go over a little bit of everything. So I know it's kind of a long list, but we're going to talk a little bit about decompression, what it's like to introduce a new dog to your home, dealing with any potty training challenges, some management techniques that'll make your life much easier, reading some body language, which is really important, especially with a dog you don't know as well, talking about some enrichment for making sure our pups stay happy and healthy and using their brains. How to introduce to other pets at home and managing those interactions, which is really important, as well as managing interactions with kids or babies. We'll talk a little bit about training and basic manners, what to do specifically around puppies, because that's such a unique time in life, and what to do when things go wrong. So we know that there are a whole bunch of more detailed topics depending on your dog. We do webinars on a whole bunch of different things, and you can always book a session with us as well. But this is what we're going to talk about. We'll do questions at the end. So if you have questions as we go along, feel free to pop them into that chat box so that when we get to the end, I can go through all those. So decompression, we talk a lot about the amount of time it takes for a new dog to settle into our home. The truth is that people will give you all these formulas, 3 hours, 3 days, 3 months, all these different things. There's no one right answer. It depends on the dog completely. We have dogs that really settle into their new homes in a matter of days, and dogs who take many, many months to fully settle in. But it's important to note that we usually see some behavior change at least over the first couple of weeks. So some dogs might pant and pace for the first 24 hours until they kind of settle in. And then people say, okay, he's settled, he's decompressed. Usually that's not the case. That's just sort of that initial period of stress, but we often don't see their full range of behaviors for a couple of weeks. So if you notice a little bit more reactivity, or you notice some boundary pushing and testing, things like that, it's all really normal for a new dog settling in. So make sure you have lots of patience with your new dog. When you bring somebody home, the first day you've brought a new dog home is not a great time to go to a party or go to the dog park. Not that hopefully most of us are going to parties right now during COVID, but notwithstanding, we want to make sure we're not overwhelming our new dogs in a situation where they still don't know us very well. So make sure that you're watching out for those behavior changes and having some patience with your dog and with yourself. Having a routine is really helpful. So your dog kind of gets to know the lay of the land, what things look like, what their schedule is going to be for eating, for going potty, for going on walks, things like that can be really helpful. And safety first. So this is a time with a dog that you don't know as well to take as few risks as you can. So if you're not sure how the dog is going to get along with another dog in the home, don't leave them alone unsupervised until you're sure. So make sure that you're always choosing safety first, especially in this beginning time as you're still getting to know each other and figuring out what works. So potty training is not just for puppies. We often find that new dogs entering their home may have a few days in their first couple of weeks where we have some accidents in the house. Usually this just has to do with a new routine where they're used to going out at a certain time and suddenly that's changed. It could be a difference in feeding routine. We also sometimes see that, oh, this couch smells like there have been dogs before. This is awfully exciting. Maybe I want to mark on this. So having a routine is really important. We also want to remember that we're managing things. So if we have a new puppy, we don't want to give him access to our living room with our nice carpet unattended. We just know that there's a likelihood he's going to have an accident there. If we know that the dog has been kind of eyeing that one spot on the coffee table that previous dogs have peed on, I wouldn't give them access to that unattended. So we want to make sure we prevent opportunities for them to have accidents. If they do have an accident, there's no point in yelling at them, trying to punish them. It doesn't work. It just confuses them. We just need to kind of figure out what we can do to fix it the next time, but make sure we throw a party when they do go outside. So making sure that, especially in the beginning, we make it really valuable for them to potty outside where we want them to, so that we can get them settled on that new routine. So again, for puppies, it may take weeks or even months, depending on their age, for them to fully be potty trained. But even with our adult dogs, setting them up for success starts with a routine when they come back to us. So management is one of my favorite things to talk about as a trainer. Oftentimes what happens is that we get people who say things like, my dog keeps eating my shoes. Every time I leave him alone, he eats a pair of shoes. And I go, well, why does he have access to the shoes after the first time? Or they'll say, he ate the chicken off the counter. And I go, well, why was the chicken on a counter that he can reach? So one of the biggest things that we work with is that we as humans want the dog to just stop doing all the things that we're doing or they're doing. And oftentimes we forget that we are smart, capable beings with opposable thumbs. We control all the resources in the house. We can set up situations where these things don't happen. So working on prevention is way easier than trying to fix some of these problems, and it can also prevent them from starting. Once a dog knows that if they jump up on the counter, there might be a snack up there, it's way harder to fix that behavior than if they never see snacks up there. It's just not that exciting. So as much as we can prevent bad behaviors from starting, it makes our lives a lot easier in training good behaviors. So think about the things that you don't want to happen or that have happened before that you didn't like, and we want to figure out how to prevent them. So like our little fluffy dog here, who has had a great time with the toilet paper roll, while it was funny enough that somebody took the picture, it's not something that you want to have happen repeatedly. And so this may be a dog who is not allowed in the bathroom unattended. And so the door to the bathroom just stays closed when he's at home alone. And so there are a lot of things like that where when you think, I really wish my dog wouldn't do this, your first thought should be, is there a way that I can manage it so he doesn't have the opportunity? So it helps you a lot to think about what you can shift in the environment, whether it's using baby gates, whether it's keeping your puppy on leash so that you know before he's going to have an accident, using your environment to your advantage. Trash cans are another big thing. Having trash cans that have good covers so that pups can't mischievously get into them is a really huge thing. So baby gates and doors are great for that. Same thing with making sure stuff isn't left out on the counters until you know that your dog doesn't care or can't get up there. You would be surprised. Some dogs are really smart about getting up to places they shouldn't be. And crates. Crates are a huge tool. I love using crates, even for dogs that don't need to stay in there. Having a dog that's crate trained is an incredible advantage. Not only are they helpful in case of an emergency. After working through Hurricane Harvey, we had a lot of dogs that needed to be crated for emergency evacuation. So it's helpful to have. It's also a great tool if your dog loves the crate, because if something happens where you break a glass and it's all over the place, you can ask your dog to go run to their crate and you know that they will be safe and sound while you pick up the glass. So you've avoided a safety hazard. So crate training can be awesome for stuff like that. Or, you have people coming over to fix something in your house, that you can put your dog away safely somewhere. It becomes a really safe spot for them to go hang out, so that when you're eating dinner, they learn that it's time to go to their crate instead of standing at the dinner table and begging for food. So there's a ton of stuff you can do with your crates. So it can be a really great management device. So body language, it is not all about tail wags. So we as humans are not nearly as good at reading dogs as dogs are at reading us. They pay attention so much to all of our body language, but oftentimes we miss the things that dogs are telling us. So most people will say, okay, if a dog's wagging its tail, it's happy. If a dog is growling at you, it's not so happy, but we miss a lot of the stuff in between. So even with a wagging tail, if we see a dog who has their tail up like this, that is not usually a happy dog. That is oftentimes a very excited dog who's very alert, who's paying attention to something. It could be a squirrel, it could be another dog, but that's not just a happy dog where we see that loose wagging tail. When we see dogs that are really stiff, that is usually a sign of excitement or maybe of fear. We often see things like what we call the whale eye, which is the whites of the eye, where we see the dog looking out the side. That can be a sign that they're uncomfortable with something. And we see a lot of what we call displacement behaviors, which are these behaviors that dogs do when they're uncomfortable and they just kind of need to do something else. It's sort of like somebody fiddling with their hands or touching their hair. Some of the things that we see commonly are dogs who are licking their lips a lot. So suddenly they haven't been eating anything, but they're licking their lips all the time, or they're yawning a lot, these big yawns when they're not tired. It could be them starting to sniff in an area where there's nothing really to sniff. Any of these kinds of behaviors that in a different context would be really normal, but they may be signs of stress in a particular context. We also see dogs kind of getting away from certain things. So we'll often see pictures of especially kids hugging dogs around the neck, and we see the dog going, ugh, and trying to pull away. Those are all signals that our dogs are not happy with these things. So it's really important that we pay attention to our dog's body language before they get to the neon flashing sign that says, I'm not okay, because they're giving us all of these other things. The shake off is another really classic one where we see the dog go, whew, and shake everything off. That usually happens after something stressful has happened. And it may not be stress bad, but there's just been something. So sometimes we'll see it at the dog park after two dogs have met and it was kind of a tense interaction, and then they'll shake off. And that's another sign that they're kind of getting rid of some stress that they've had from that interaction. So definitely want to check these out. These are all drawings by Lily Chin. She has some great stuff out there with Boogie the Boston Terrier. So checking out body language and watching for those things is really important. And then making sure we respect these signals. So if your dog is telling you, I'm uncomfortable, I do not want to be hugged, I'm not comfortable being picked up, don't do the thing. We need to work on our communication, but they need to trust that we will listen to those signals. Otherwise, they'll escalate them. So enrichment is hugely important. For a long time, we thought about you just need to exercise your dog. A tired dog is a good dog. Everything is about physical activity. They should be tired all the time. And what we're discovering is that sometimes that's actually not great, that sometimes a really tired dog is a cranky dog. But what's really important is that we're using their brains. So dogs, even though they're not as smart as humans in some ways, they really like to use their noses. They have great senses of smell. They're used to being able to forage for food. There's so much stuff that dogs are biologically built to do that's enjoyable for them. In some studies, they've even found that dogs will choose to work for food instead of getting it out of a food bowl. So when it came out of like a puzzle toy, they wanted that because it was fun and engaging. So we want to make sure that we give them opportunities to sniff and use their nose and use their brains to do fun things. So one of the best ways to do that is through not feeding out of a food bowl. So instead of using a food bowl, you can use food puzzles. There are a variety of things from some of the stuff that I have here, which are just Kongs and some other devices that are sort of rubbery that you fill up with different treats or kibble. You can put in sour cream, you can put in cream cheese, peanut butter, and then you freeze them so that your dog has to lick and chew and kind of paw it around until they get the stuff out. There are snuffle mats, which are basically like a shag carpet made out of felt, and you put the treats in and sprinkle it in, and then the dog has to snuffle their way through with their nose to get all the treats out. You can sprinkle treats in the grass in your backyard if you have it. We want to make sure that when we're taking our dogs on walks that they get to go on a sniffari. You know, them smelling stuff is not them trying to get in the middle of our walk. That's the purpose of our walk, is for them to go out and smell things and use their brains and their noses. So one of the first questions I often ask our clients when we're talking is, what kind of enrichment are they doing during the day? Because a bored dog likes to get into trouble. A frustrated dog likes to get into trouble. So if we keep their mind occupied and make sure we're fulfilling their needs every day, they're much less likely to get into stuff that we don't want them to. So enrichment is a great thing. It can be physical, it can be mental. There's an amazing group called Canine Enrichment on Facebook that has many thousands of people on there talking about different ideas. So it's a great place to go for resources. And we also have a whole list on our website at everydogaustin.org/resources. You can look at the enrichment section on there, which is pretty cool. So other pets. Other pets in the home always adds a level of complexity, and it depends entirely on the situation. Some dogs are happy to be around any and all other animals. Some dogs are really selective. Some dogs are not comfortable at all being around certain other kinds of animals or being around other animals of their own species. So it depends entirely on the individual dogs, but the key is patience. We tend to find that people, if their dogs get along right away, they just go, okay, you live together now, hope for the best. They leave them alone when they go to the store and just pray. This doesn't always go well. So we recommend taking a slow approach. Again, not taking extra risks, taking things slow, in the erring on the side of safety. But it does mean a little bit of patience, especially when our dogs don't always get along right away, or when they don't like the family cat. There's something else like that going on. So using neutral spaces, things like going on a walk together versus just bringing a new dog into the home. Some dogs say, no, this is my house. I don't like you entering my house. Versus if we go on a walk together, that can help break the ice. We also want to make sure good things happen together. So what folks tend to sometimes do is they're keeping the dogs separated. And so they're getting attention separately, but nothing good is happening when they're together. They're only kind of moving and trading spaces. And maybe they're getting yelled at because they're not getting along very well. When what we really want to make sure happens is that when the two dogs can see each other, that's when the good things happen. Or when the cat is around and the dog is hanging out and not chasing the cat, that is when the dog gets good treats and good things happen. And same for the cat. We want them to learn that being around each other is a great thing. We also want to eliminate areas for conflict. So if we know that some dogs might want to guard their toys and not share them, then the first thing we do is we pick up all of the toys before we start doing interactions, because we never know. We don't know for sure. And so it can take some time to figure out whether our dogs are going to be happy sharing or not, or maybe they're happy sharing toys, but not bones. And so bones just don't go down in the common spaces. Those are given separately in different areas. So we want to make sure that we eliminate causes for conflict in the beginning. If you know your dog has a tendency to kind of guard you or want your attention, and you're bringing a new dog home, you want to figure out ways to make sure that this isn't going to feel like your dog has to protect his resource from the new dog. Again, patience. I don't know if I've said this before. Patience is a huge thing when introducing new pets to the home. We just want to make sure that, for the next however many years, things go well. And so taking the first few weeks to be smart about it can make a huge difference in your life. And as always, safety precautions are a big deal, especially if we're dealing with larger dogs, or if we're dealing with a large dog and a cat, or there's a size difference. We just want to make sure everybody is safe. And so that's where not leaving anybody unattended, using baby gates, keeping somebody on leash. Sometimes it's using muzzles if we know that one of our dogs can be selective. So making sure that we're using all of the precautions we have in place to try and keep things as safe as possible. We see this a lot, especially with cats, where we have a dog who we don't know is safe with cats. We want to make sure that our kitty is protected, that she has the ability to get away, that she's not going to be in any kind of unsafe position, that we're protecting our small dogs or our kitties from a new dog, just because we don't know. Once we get a better idea, we can work with things there, but we want to be safe rather than sorry when we start. So kids and dogs, this is another place where safety is key. And this is the place where, again, I always tell you, you are the adult in the situation. You are the only one with the big brain and the opposable thumbs. This becomes really important because kids under a certain age, usually around that 9 or 10 years old, cannot reliably follow instructions 100% of the time. We know that they're going to miss something somewhere. Dogs are the same way. But oftentimes we have an expectation that dogs will tolerate things, they will put up with things, they wouldn't possibly do something wrong. But again, their brains are sort of like that of a toddler. And so what ends up happening is that when we leave our small kids and our dogs together, somebody makes the wrong call. We end up with a bite, we end up with somebody crying, we end up with a dog who's afraid of children. It could be a number of things, but it goes really wrong. And so this is a place where the biggest thing is to remember that you are the adult in the situation and that neither the small children nor the dogs can be responsible for making good decisions for themselves. We have to make the good decisions for them. And so that's where setting up the environment is really important. If you have kids and dogs, we have an awesome webinar from just a few weeks ago that's again on our website, all about kids and dogs, led by Jen Burns of Conscious Dog Training. And it is fantastic. The keys again are supervision, management, building appropriate reactions, because again, we wouldn't expect any of our friends to put up with somebody being consistently rude to them or getting in their face, things like that. We also can't expect our dogs to put up with children sitting on them, hugging their faces when they're uncomfortable, pulling their tails, bopping them on the head, nor would we expect children to put up with a dog who's consistently in their face and knocking them over, things like that. So we want to make sure that we're able to moderate those relationships so that we can build a really positive relationship over time. This is another place where resource guarding tends to be an issue because, again, children don't know that they shouldn't stick their hands into the things like the bones and the food bowls and stuff like that. So just be mindful that that can be a thing, as well as the fact that toddlers and babies make weird sounds, they smell different, they move differently. All of those things can be overwhelming for some dogs. And so it's not usually that the dog is aggressive, it's usually that the dog is really uncomfortable and is unsure what to do in that situation. So there are a number of things that we can do to kind of make those more comfortable so that we're more likely to succeed in that family unit. So training stuff, training tips. So we get a lot of people coming to us saying, we just want to train our dog. So a lot of what we've talked about so far is how we kind of manage situations, set them up for success, things to watch out for. When it comes to actually training skills, here are a few of the things that are really important. So one of them is using positive reinforcement. So my friend Juliana there is wearing a shirt that says reinforcement drives behavior. We have many, many decades of science. We know how animals, including humans, think and learn, and all of it is based on what we get. So if we do something and something good happens, we want to do that thing again. It's incredibly effective. There are so many things that we can teach our dogs using this. And we can use reinforcers like praise, like toys, like petting. We can use access to things. If they really want to go for a walk, we can use that as a reward. But our biggest thing is food. It's a primary reinforcer. It's something that every dog wants. To some degree, you know, certain dogs are a little bit more picky about the food that they want to use, but it's an incredible teaching tool. It is the fastest, easiest way to get new behavior is by using food, doing positive reinforcement training. So why do we avoid punishment? Here's the thing, punishment also has many decades of science behind it. We know that it's effective. The problem is that it has some fallout. So for one thing, it can easily break our relationship with our dog when they associate us with bad things happening to them. It can also attach to other things in the environment, not just us. So what happens is, you know, Fido sees another dog and he's uncomfortable, and so he starts barking and growling at it, and his owner has him on a choke chain and tugs on the choke chain because he wants to tell him to stop barking. But what ends up happening is that now Fido has an association that I saw the scary dog and something really bad happened to me. Now I really don't like the scary dog. So we have these associations that can be formed where just like the collar and the leash become so exciting. Oh my goodness, I'm so excited because they're associated with good things. But we have other pieces where if we use punishment, if we use aversive methods, there's a likelihood that they will bleed over and affect other things that we do. We don't really care if the positive effects bleed over because we want our dogs to be happy and excited about life. But if these negative experiences do, we can have some real trouble. It can lead to aggression issues. There are a whole bunch of reasons why we try and avoid it with our pet dogs as much as humanly possible. And a lot of the time, the easiest way to get a dog to stop doing the thing we don't want it to do is to teach them to do something else instead. So we do a lot of teaching alternative behaviors. So for example, if my dog is jumping up on strangers, I say, oh, I really don't want him to jump on strangers. Okay, well, if I flip that, I think I want him to sit for strangers. So I can very quickly teach him, when strangers approach, if you sit, you get good stuff and you get pets. If you jump up, the stranger leaves, nothing happens. It's very boring. So instead of trying to punish the jumping, I can just teach them something that gets them way better stuff that works for them, instead of this thing of jumping that just doesn't work for them. So it naturally goes away. It reaches what we call extinction because we built this different behavior that's more worth it. So there's a lot of stuff like that where, again, when you see a behavior you don't like, your first thought is, can I manage this? Can I put the trash can away? Can I put the shoes away? Can I put up a baby gate? Your second thought is, can I teach them something else that I want them to do instead? So those are a couple of big things about how we train. Depending on what you want to do at home, set up a consult with us and we can totally go through that. But some of the things that I really recommend doing with all of our pet dogs, and eye contact is an easy one. It is the foundation for everything else, but just a dog looking up at you, especially on walks. Oh my goodness, how much better would your life be if your dog would just check in with you on walks instead of dragging you off in some direction or barking at the dog or whatever else it is. So building a reliable eye contact cue is awesome. Sit's helpful. We like to have a default sit so that our dog knows when they want something. If they sit, it's a good bet they might get that thing. So it's great for things like waiting at the door or waiting for the food bowl. So any of those things that teach them, okay, if you sit and you wait, you're likely to get the thing that you want. It gives us a really nice default behavior where we don't even have to ask for it at some point. They just know that this is our routine. Crate training, like I said before, can be really helpful for safety. Waiting at the door, I really like if your dogs are like mine, and when I got her, the door would open and she would want to bolt outside, not safe. So teaching her to wait at the door is awesome. Recall, again, can save your dog's life. If you have had to use the word come or their name to get them to come to you to do things like go in the bath or go to the vet or leave something fun, you need to make sure that for every time you do that, there's like 10 times that you're practicing it when only good stuff happens. Because the worst thing is when you're calling your dog and they go, last 4 times I came to you, you made me do stuff that was not fun. So we want to make sure that that's a really strong cue that they're willing to respond to, because if we lose that, we have a serious safety problem. So that's a fun one to work on, even if you're at home, just calling them from another room, or if there's multiple of you living in the home, you can ping pong them to different rooms of the house. It makes a really fun game and it makes recall really fun for them. Loose leash walking is another one of those places where we kind of have to reframe what we want. So instead of thinking, I want them to stop pulling, we think, I want them to stay in this area by my side. So we reward them for walking kind of in that 4-foot space next to us on whichever side we want. And they learn, okay, it's way better to stay with my person than it is to be pulling off into the distance. And then the pulling stops on its own. So instead of thinking, I want him to stop doing this thing, we think, I want him to do this instead. And then leave it, drop it, and trades. This is another great one for safety. We never know when we might reach a situation again where we spill a bottle of ibuprofen on the floor and we know that our dog can't safely eat that, or there's a dead bird on the side of the road that we do not want them to eat. So leave it is a great skill to teach that says, whatever this thing is, you do not go after it. You do not put it in your mouth, and it's worth it to you because I'm going to teach you that that's worth it. You will get treats for leaving things alone. We also have our drop it, which says you already have something in your mouth. You will get good things for dropping it. And sometimes that drop it might mean I'll give it back to you. So it might be a toy where it says you drop it and I'll toss it for you again. Sometimes it might be you drop it, I take the thing, I put it in the garbage and I give you a treat for it because you should not have had that old tissue that you found on the road. So these skills are really, really helpful for those kinds of safety risks and also the gross things, because what can happen otherwise is that your dog gets something that you don't want them to have and they run away. and they go hide it. Or they bare their teeth at you and say, I don't want you to take this from me. You're sticking your hands in their mouth. None of that is fun. So we want to teach our dogs to leave things alone. And when that fails, or if we haven't caught it early enough, we want to teach them to drop things for us. If they don't have either of those things, or if they're not working in that moment, your biggest thing is to find a trade. We don't want to shove our hands into our dogs' mouths ever, if at all possible, because bites are not fun. They get infected. It's not ideal. So if you can make a trade, do it. So whatever they have, you go to your fridge, you find something in there, you're trying to toss it away from them to get it out of there, and you are throwing a party when that works, and making sure, again, that you have built up enough times of good faith that one time when you can't give them something back because you're out on a walk and you ran out of treats, that they're still going to give it up for you, and you can make that up to them later. So it's sort of like a savings account where we're putting money in by creating this history of saying, every time you do this, good stuff happens, so that if we need to make a withdrawal, we can afford to do that and the dog will still do it, especially in a safety situation. So those are some of the main things that we look at when it comes to training. Obviously, there's a million things. If you want to teach your dog to stay, to wait, to shake, like all these fun things, do it. You can teach touch, hand targeting. You can teach them to sit pretty. You can teach tricks, and that's great enrichment. There's so much stuff. But these are the ones that we like to have pretty much all of our pet dogs learn for safety and just ease of life. So a few things about training that are important for everybody to know. One of them is that treat value matters, just like payment matters. If your boss said, I'm going to pay you $10 every 2 weeks to do your job, you probably would not be as willing to do it as if they said, I'm going to pay you $1,000 a week or $10,000 a week. So it's really important that we know that our dogs are smart enough to recognize the difference between things, and that every dog has sort of their treat value scale. So for my current dog, cheese is only okay, but things like turkey, ham, hot dogs are super high value. With other dogs I've worked with, cheese is the biggest thing. One of my friends, her dog likes wheat thins. That is his number one treat. Sometimes it's Tostitos, sometimes it's teriyaki chicken. It could be anything. Oftentimes the little freeze-dried treats are middle scale. They're better than the kibble or any of the crunchy treats, but it depends entirely on the dog. And so this is important because you might be able to get away with using their daily food to do, sit, touch, drop it, other things in the house. But if you go outside, they're not going to work for that. There's so much stuff in the outside. There's squirrels, there's dogs, there's people, there's sounds. It's just not paying enough. And so we want to make sure that when we say, oh, well, he won't pay any attention to me or to treats when XYZ, then we probably need better treats. So that's really important. Same thing with distractions, where if they're totally overwhelmed in the big bad world, we need better treats and we probably need less distraction. So we want to make sure we're working in easy mode for our dogs. We can't expect them to do calculus if they can't do algebra reliably. And so oftentimes we expect our dogs, we practice sit that one time. They should be able to do it in this park with, 14 dogs around them. They can't. Their little brains can't handle it yet. They need more time to learn these things. So use your treats to your advantage and be cautious of the amount of distraction in the area. So some of the things that can get in the way of your training are some of the myths or the common things that we hear that don't really help. So one of them is that in popular culture, it's really common to hear people describe their dogs as the alpha, as being dominant, all these kind of things about the pack leader. The thing is, none of that is real. It was a piece of research that was done poorly 50 years ago that got really popular and then was retracted, but it had already taken off because it's this really fun story. The problem is that it's not how dogs function. So dominance is a thing in the animals, but they don't form these hierarchies. There's not an alpha dog. And they certainly don't think humans are the alphas. They know that humans are not dogs. So dogs, just like humans, have complex individual relationships with other dogs. They make friends. Some of them like sharing, not so much. They might share with one dog, but not with others. They might decide where to go with certain groups of dogs, but not with others. So they form these really complex bonds. They also are not trying to be in any kind of dominance war with humans. So if you hear people say things like, oh, sleeping on the bed, they must be dominant, or if they sat on your foot, or if they left the door in front of you. No, they wanted to go outside. So there's a lot of stuff where people will tell you, or say that their dog is being dominant, and it's a catch-all for a whole bunch of stuff that we don't like. But it's not how things work. And the problem with that is the same problem that we have with the term stubborn, which is that it makes it into a personality trait rather than a set of behaviors we can change. So if you just say, oh, my dog is stubborn, well then, okay, he's stubborn. What do we do about that? No. Your dog knows you're not paying him enough to do this task in this environment. Or your dog knows that if he comes in with you, he's going to be left alone for the next 6 hours, and he doesn't want to because he's figured it out and it's not worth it for him. And so whenever we're having these words where we're like, he's stubborn or he's stupid, I think this about my own dog. I swear she is not the brightest, but she's real cute. But generally, when dogs are not doing the things we want them to do, or they're doing things that we think are naughty, we tend to assign personality traits rather than thinking, okay, how can I change this behavior? Dogs do what works for them, just like humans do. And so how can I make them want to do the things that I want them to do? So as soon as we put on that kind of behavior hat instead of the personality hat, it becomes much easier to figure out how to change the stuff that we don't love. And it's the same thing I mentioned with treat motivated. Yes, there are dogs who are not treat motivated, but they're so rare. They're so rare. I swear to you, 99% of people who tell me their dog is not treat motivated, either they're using really low quality biscuits and can't figure out why their dog doesn't want them, or they're using okay treats, but they're outside in the world with 14 squirrels in the yard. So we need to make sure that we have that balance where if your dog is not taking food, there's a good chance either your food isn't good enough or your situation is too exciting or too overwhelming. For our fearful dogs, it could be just, I'm terrified in this environment. I can't pay attention to food right now. So keep that in mind. There are a lot of people who will tell us, oh, she's more praise motivated than food motivated. There have been a variety of studies on this. Almost all of them showcase that the vast majority of dogs will prefer food over the petting and the praise and things like that. They'll like all of those things, but the primary reinforcer is always that food. So puppies, for whether you have a new puppy or someone with a new puppy, there are a few really important things. Everything we've talked about applies. The things that are specific to puppies are a few. So one of them is the socialization period. So it's different again for every puppy, but from about 6 weeks to about 16 weeks, there's this critical socialization period. And it's basically the time where puppies' brains are like sponges. They're learning so much about the world. It's just really, really changing quickly. And so this is a time where we want to expose them to lots of new and novel things while they have really positive experiences. What we find is that puppies who experience novel things like textures, sounds, other dogs, people, sights, smells during this time and have good experiences with them, later on in life, when they see those things or they experience new novel things, are much more comfortable with it versus dogs that don't experience those things. So if anybody has puppies, we have a checklist. It is great. It lists a million things, not a million, it lists about 100 things on there that we think are really worth it for puppies to see. And some of them that people don't think of, ceiling fans. I cannot tell you how many dogs I have fostered that are totally terrified of a ceiling fan. They have no idea what it is. It is terrifying. And so making sure that our puppies see them if they're going to live in Texas is an important thing. Dogs try to kill the vacuum cleaner because it's absolutely terrifying. It's a weird thing. It makes loud noises. It moves funny. So having our puppies experiencing those early things like tile floors, wood floors, concrete floors, different textures and surfaces, hearing different sounds, all of that is super important during this puppy period, but we have to make sure it's paired with good stuff. So if we are bringing our puppy to a place where they're going to see ducks at the pond, but they're terrified and trying to pull back and we're dragging them toward it, they're not going to develop the positive association we want. So we have to take it at their speed and make sure they have good experiences. Again, using lots of food, throwing a party every time they get to do these, and making sure we're not forcing them into it as much as humanly possible. Keep in mind also that once they get out of that age and they're more in that 4 to 9 month-ish, we have sort of a teenage phase. It's normal for them to test boundaries, try and see if they can get away with things. Again, they're not being bad, they're just being normal, just like our toddlers do that. They want to see what they can get away with. So we do often see some behavior changes in there. And throughout this puppyhood and adolescence, we sometimes see fear periods where suddenly they're for a couple weeks fearful of stuff that they weren't before. It's normal, it happens, it's not always predictable, but the key is still to let them explore things at their own time, make it really worth their while, give them good experiences, so that hopefully later they're braver about stuff, even if they got nervous about it temporarily. And if you have puppies, they're a lot. They're a lot. I deal with a lot of puppy parents who are like, I haven't slept and he keeps biting me. And did I make the right decision? You're not alone. Puppies are hard. There's a lot we can still do to work through some of that, especially things like the puppy biting. So if you're struggling with that, just let us know. We've got plenty of resources to help with that. So common things that go wrong. Some of the most common problems that we see, one of them is resource guarding. Again, resource guarding is a normal behavior on a spectrum. So I would not enjoy it if somebody next to me stole my filet mignon, but if they took a fry off my plate, I would probably be okay with that. So a single French fry is okay, but not my filet mignon. And it would be different if it were my friend versus somebody I didn't know. So resource guarding, not wanting people to have your stuff is normal, but we sometimes see pieces of it that are not okay in their situation. It could be guarding bones. If people come near them, the dog snaps. It could be from other dogs in the home, where if somebody's eating and another dog comes near their food bowl, it's an issue. We always recommend feeding pets separately in separate areas just to avoid that. Separation anxiety. Again, this is a place where there's a difference between being slightly distressed about being left alone and, crying for a little bit and then going off and doing your own thing. That's not separation anxiety. That's normal behavior. We do have dogs that tear apart couches, that try and jump through windows, that, harm themselves, that destroy property because they're having a panic attack. So when we do see separation anxiety, that is absolutely something that we want to treat quickly. We see a lot of our excited behaviors, lack of impulse control, jumping all over people, really mouthy, even as adults. Again, a lot of this is just learning what they need to do instead, but some dogs really struggle with this. We see a lot of fearful dogs. We also get a lot of reactive dogs, especially here in Austin. We are now expecting dogs to live in cities when they were not expected to do that 50 years ago the same way. So we have plenty of dogs that will bark, whine, lunge, growl, scream at other dogs, sometimes at other people or bicycles. So we see it commonly. And a lot of dogs really struggle with the vet. They may turn into Cujo when they go into the vet office. We see that all too frequently. But these are all things where if you are experiencing this in your household more than just a minor way that's not getting in the way of stuff, if you're seeing these things, reach out, find a trainer, reach out to us. Even if you're not in our area, we will help you find someone, because these are the kinds of things that we don't like to have people try and mess with and try and fix on their own, or using random videos that they find on YouTube. The world out there is scary with dog training and people saying that they're doing dog training. But these are the kinds of things where if you're having these issues, reach out and we will make sure we get you help. So shopping list, there are so many fun things to get for your dog. But a couple of things that we wanted to kind of put out there. The only collars we recommend using are either a flat collar or a martingale collar. We don't recommend using anything that's with a chain, anything that is a choke collar, any kind of prong, e-collar, shock collar, none of those things. We recommend using just a flat collar or a martingale collar. The only real difference, the martingale collar will tighten up, but only slightly. And so that can be helpful if your dog might be a flight risk. So there's someone who might slip out of their collar, or if they're shaped in a way that they've got a fat neck and a skinny head. So again, it's more likely to go over their ears. So the martingale, we don't use that as a training tool. We just use it so that it's less likely to slip over. We really like using harnesses for walking. The Freedom and the Balance harness are probably our two most commonly recommended. They're made well, and the big thing is when you walk them on that, it's not putting pressure on the trachea. Collars can do quite a bit of long-term damage over time if your dog is pulling a lot, so a harness is safer. We like using them primarily for that reason. So in addition to Kongs, there are a ton of other things that you can use to put stuff in and freeze it. You can even do this for their daily food. So that's a great resource to have. I often use that. I'll do a food prep at the beginning of the week. I'll freeze a bunch of them. And then anytime I need to leave the house, I'll give one of them to my dog. That way she associates me leaving with getting something good, and it takes her attention off of stuff for a good 10 minutes. So those are a great idea, and it doesn't have to be just Kong. There's a bunch of products like that. There are also these slow feeders, and they come in all kinds of different colors, shapes, sizes, food puzzles, things like that. Some dogs get them really quickly. Some dogs get certain things really quickly, but not others. We don't want to frustrate our dogs, but finding something like that so they're not just eating out of a bowl is a great idea. We highly recommend using a flat leash and not a flexi leash. Flexi leashes are really, really scary to me for a couple of reasons. One of them is that other people don't know how close your dog can get. So if somebody has a reactive dog or a dog who's maybe not safe with other dogs approaching, and your dog is approaching quickly and they have no idea how close they can get, that can rapidly become a really unsafe situation. It's a signal to other dog owners how close your dog can get, and it also lets you know. So it helps you work on loose leash walking and make sure that your dog isn't running off into places they shouldn't be. I've also seen too many people get caught up and get rope burn and stuff like that from the flexies. So if at all possible, I would totally recommend using a flat leash. They have far fewer issues. And then I also have the snuffle mat on here. Again, it's one of those enrichment items. There are a million different brands. There are DIY things if you feel like that would be fun for you. There's all kinds of different ones like that, bigger, smaller, different things like that. You just put the kibble in there and then they have to kind of snuffle it out to get it out there. I thought it was going to be ridiculous when I bought it. I thought my dogs were not going to care at all, and every dog I have exposed it to has loved it. So that's what my experience has been so far. Okay, so we did it. We went through a ton of stuff today, and I know it's a little bit of everything, and probably for most of you, there's something else that you wanted to know about. If you have questions that you want to ask now, feel free to put them in the chat window. And keep in mind too, that you can always get in touch with me. You have my email address. You can book a consult with us. We usually do virtual consults first, but then we can do private sessions socially distanced. So we have a ton of options for answering specific questions about you and your family. So again, reminders, things to do, please follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We post really cute pictures. You can send us pictures of your pups for us to post. We love getting pictures of people's cute dogs. And if you like what we're doing, please feel free to leave us a review on Facebook, on Nextdoor, or on Google. We love those so that people know that what we're doing is useful. We do those private consults. They're $75 for an initial consult, but if financial situations are difficult for folks, just let us know. We will figure it out. And then we do offer these workshops every couple of weeks. Our next one, I believe, is on the 27th, and it's about the importance of puppy socialization. So kind of like the science behind why it is so critical to do that. But we have stuff every couple of weeks. We had one on reactivity a couple of weeks ago. So join those things. We'll have more stuff in the future, COVID permitting, and we're really excited about all of that. We're also a nonprofit, so if you'd like to make a donation, we would love that. It allows us to help more people and pups.